I'm delighted to welcome you to another episode of GTC Insiders, and this is where we bring you the expert views from the markets. I'm delighted to say we're joined by Gautam and Keiron from SEKURA Mobile, and also my colleague Guillaume Bourcy, who's actually, it's his birthday today, so we've got to be nice to him. So SEKURA obviously focus on mobile identity, one of the leaders in the marketplace, help actually found this area. And we're joined by two of the leading experts in this space. So we'll start, as always, with introductions. So perhaps, Keiron, I could ask you to go first.
Thank you, James. Happy birthday, Guillaume. My name's Keiron Dalton. My role in SEKURA is Chief Product Officer. My background is actually concentrated on mobile identity now for probably 10 years. So I've worked in the operator side, I've worked with other vendors, I worked at the GSMA for a period of time as well with Gautam. And now for the last however many years it is, I've been in SEKURA. So my responsibility is essentially product propositioning and all of our partnerships and go to market. So that's me.
Thanks, James, and happy birthday, Guillaume. My role in SEKURA is Chief Technology Officer. I work very closely with Keiron for the product side. My background is telecoms all the way, and APIs. So APIs we are going to talk about today, but it's something that's not new. It's actually pretty old in the telecom world, right? And I have been involved from the first initiative in 2008, One API from GSMA, to Joint Innovation Lab GIL, again from 2008, WAC, Wholesale Application Community in 2010, Mobile Connect, where me, Keiron, and Mark met, where, the most active participation. And now Open Gateway and in SEKURA taking that initiative from the digital identity perspective, in a much more accelerated way. Have been in the identity space for, again, very long, I think since 2007 when I was in Vodafone. And, all of me, Keiron, Mark, and the entire team in SEKURA, we are extremely passionate about that identity thing. And we're going to talk about that, why it is and why we think that identity is something that needs to be talked about even more.
Fantastic. And clearly we're going to focus the limelight on Gautam and Keiron, but given that it is his birthday, I think it's only fair that Guillaume introduces himself as well.
Thank you for the spotlight on that. I reached a certain number of years where you decide to not celebrate your birthday anymore, but I still appreciate it. It's still very, very nice. Thank you. So I've been in the telecom industry also for almost 20 years and most of my career there. And I fall into the mobile identity segment 10 years ago, but more on the international side of the things. Back in the days, through BICS and then Swisscom was launching the first APIs there. It was pretty interesting as an environment, and just all really definitely mad of that space and the perspective it offers. So yes, that's and joining GTC to become the chief identity officer, really looking at whole digital identity aspects and how it becomes more and more intertwined between messaging. Either you're talking about there's a two-factor authentication process that's been there for ages, and then also RCS evolving there. And then other like payments and so on, and everything has got this base, which is digital identity and the needs of it to sustain all that ecosystem.
Fantastic. So this really is going to be quite an immersive mobile identity experience. So let's get things kicked off. We've probably set a bit of foundations because if it wasn't for things like the Open Gateway API, I don't think this would really exist. So perhaps we could start talking around kind of what that is for people that maybe don't understand it quite as well as you guys.
I can start?
I was going to say, Gautam, out of everybody, I think you're the man for this one.
I'll start, and Guillaume, Keiron, please join in. So, Open Gateway API initiative is, I think the three words there, Open Gateway and APIs, right? That gives enough justice to what it is. Although, as I was mentioning, this is not the first initiative from the telecom industry, right? There were a lot many other previous incarnations to that. But I will say, considering I was involved in all others, this is probably the most, it's still early because it was announced last year only, but so far, the adaptation to that, the energy that we can see from the industry, from the consumer side as well, from the businesses, and from the mobile operators, is the maximum. So what Open Gateway API initiative is from GSMA is an attempt to democratize the services that the mobile operators had from very long, right? So from 1991, at least when the first GSM network was created, right? And there's a lot of assets, lot of valuable data, lot of valuable services that's been added over all the, let's say, Gs. From 1G never existed, right? We never call it 1G, but let's call it 1G. To 6G we are talking about now. There's a lot of evolution that has happened. There's a lot of assets and things which are there in the mobile operator world, but they stayed trapped within the mobile operators, right? That's the largest connectivity platform on earth. Let's face it. So around 5.7. So there is a ticker in the mobile, GSMA Intelligence website, where it actually, it just rolls. So anyway, so that's 5.7 billion people on earth out of 8 billion are connected in that network. So all those assets, they need to be opened up for the society, for the digital world, so that those services can be utilized to innovate, to make the society better, like digital identity we'll talk about. That's to make the society better, right? To solve all the fraud problems, and also to expose the innovative things like the 5G quality on demand, the MEC, the multi-access edge things, and also the payment infrastructure that the operators have, to expose in an open way through APIs. That's the objective of the Open Gateway APIs. And I think we all are very excited about that, including all the, let's say, ecosystem players.
Just to add to that as well, I guess my perspective is, having done this now for a number of years, and it being, I think it's fair to say, a constant challenge, because you've got this, I think it's fair to say the demand is there, but the supply has always been, let's just say, an issue, purely because that normalization and trying to get adoption and the costs involved, et cetera, it's just, it's a heavy lifting kind of process to get things kind of enabled, shall we say. And so to see almost like a reinvigoration within particularly the telco community, where like as recently, I think it was yesterday, I was on a call, and you can see the significant interest, and without trying to sound too corny, there's an energy there that wasn't there before, to actually establish more and more use cases, more and more kind of products and capabilities. And I think now we're at that point of, we've always kind of dreamed of having almost like this like a global proposition. Because let's face it, based on, as Gautam said, the billions of people that are connected already via the mobile networks that already exist, we should be in a position that we can leverage that to develop, as we call it, kind of the identity layer that's missing. But like I say, the critical thing now is, for me, it's that execution stage. And actually the next layer is the business element. It's one thing having all of this weird and wonderful kind of APIs and connectivity in place, but making sure that it's relevant and making sure that it's impactful for the end consumer, and doing it in a way that's commercially, let's just say, aware or sensitive, or whatever word we want to use. That's the next element that, I think there's a bit of work to be done, but it's definitely reinvigorated things.
Fantastic. So,
maybe, and just to jump back on this and what Gautam and Keiron have said just now, I think first on Gautam, what you're saying is about the digital inclusion. We've seen the payment, the communication. It seems that it's being created in silos, right? While actually they should be intertwined together, especially if you want to promote that digital inclusion, especially in emerging countries and so on. And so digital identity seems to be kind of the basis for that can really kind of merge both. And it's just a basis. It's not a product by itself. It just should be started from there for that digital inclusion and goes from there. And then on Keiron's point, it's true that we see a lot more energy around the Open Gateway API initiative by the GSMA, was much more than what we have seen in the past, with the big actors being much more involved into it. And that's really refreshing, especially for some other people here, and have been around for, we talk about like Gautam for since 2008 at the least, Keiron and myself for the last 10 years. It's a really fantastic. You are not alone in the desert anymore. There is people joining forces, and that is really, really good. The dynamic, it's really about the dynamic behind it.
So it's the perfect start to the call with the excitement, the energy. So perhaps we could touch upon kind of the benefits of adoption, because it feels like momentum's coming through. But why should people kind of adopt? What are the benefits that would come through?
You got them, mate? Do you want to?
Yeah, please.
No, sorry, I don't want to tread on your toes. So I guess there's kind of layers to this. I think, just to set some context, when I started to look at this type of thing, it was I'm just going to call it kind of pre-operator awareness. I'm not saying every operator wasn't aware, and I'm sure Gautam was way ahead of it, but it was almost kind of exploring what was inherent within networks and leverage it for things like fraud prevention, a number of kind of identity verification services. And it was almost kind of using that then as a proof point, as a business case to bring operators into the mix and say, right, you're sat on a kind of latent opportunity here where you can innovate based on what you already have, the best form of innovation. So from a benefits perspective, I look at that from an operator side and think there's a real chance here to grab that relevance that unfortunately I think they've lost in a number of areas. I think the second thing is, for the likes of just purely, I'm just going to say Sekura, we've been, we're connected now to, I've lost count of the numbers, but it's somewhere between 2.5 and 3 billion consumers via a number of groups and individual operators. That was not easy in any way, shape or form. And yet what we see now is a real opportunity to kind of expedite the next step. Because where we would maybe look at an operator and think, we can help you enable services, and we have a platform to do that, and we've done that already. Plus, we can help them on the commercial side. But it doesn't matter if you're fighting against something which is, well, we don't have a budget, and we don't have this, and we don't have that. It's a long tail. It's a long sales cycle, if you like. So for us, it's that reinvigoration piece. But I think the critical bit is, and this is what we touch on, it's the human impact. And if you look at some of the things that we've done in the likes of South Africa and other places where the demographic of the consumer and the behavior of the consumer is just completely different, but yet everybody is looking for the same types of services. It's ease of access, it's enablement, it's the ability to do basic things like send a payment using a mobile phone, which I appreciate isn't that basic, but in conceptual terms, it is. Now we've got a chance because we've got an audience that is engaged and energetic to be able to support that, which in turn will lead to a real impact, I believe, anyway, on the end consumer, which I think is the critical bit.
Just adding on to what Keiron was saying on the benefits, right? So there are two sides to it. There's a supply chain, right? Open Gateway is an initiative in the middle. Suppliers are all the mobile operators. And by the way, last time I checked in GSMA Intelligence, there are 1,250 mobile operators, right? So the benefits for them, right? And then the benefits of the consumers in the supply chain, right? Consumers are the businesses, and then ultimately it's the end users like us, right? So for the operators, it is, as we all know, there is a kind of the core business of the mobile operators is under stress, right? Let's just face it. And again, if you go to the GSMA Intelligence side, there is a ticker that says, what's the ARPU per month as compared to last year, right? If you go it now, I checked this morning, it was 0.12% less than last year, right? And that probably is more optimistic. I'm sure the reality probably is much worse, right? That's for the core business, right? And it's not surprising because now, there is stress from the OTT players as well, right? So voice, so it's not just operators doing voice with mobility. WhatsApp does the same and others, right? So that's understandable. So in that case, how can the mobile operators utilize the assets, investment they have done in the spectrum in 5G, and then they're doing in 6G, they can actually open up other revenue stream and utilize those investments and get some revenue out of it. An Open Gateway initiative provides a platform to do that. We utilize the assets which are already there, utilize the data in a privacy-centric way, of course, right? That's important. And then open up other revenue channels. And that's a no-brainer, right? Then coming back to the businesses, as Keiron was saying as well, is, it's the API economy. And that's been proven, right? So API Toolkit, they're a big API kind of advocates. They claim that the businesses which utilizes API, there is a potential of 24% more profitable than if you don't use APIs, right? And that's not just mobile operators APIs, that's API economy in general, right? So in that case, if all these services are all the services that, we can really talk about available from Open Gateway and beyond, right? Including digital identity and mobile identity, these services which are exposed through APIs and consumed by the businesses, right, in a standardized way, so that they don't need to do differently across all these 1,250 operators. So one integration, technically, commercially, contractually, and they can actually create their service scale across the globe. That's a big benefit. And the API economy already showed the profit, right? So that's the benefit for them. And then, of course, the end users will get the benefit from all the innovation that will come up from these businesses utilizing these APIs exposed by all these 1,250 operators in a single standardized way.
The way I liken it to the open banking side of things, but I think with where we are, there are far more obvious killer applications for what we've got. Whereas open banking, I think that it's kind of limited in terms of what it can do, albeit it does make an impact. With us, it's, we're talking about a global connectivity that we can tap into with a whole suite of services and behaviors and all the rest of it that means we can impact essentially across everything.
I think maybe I'm coming back on Gautam's point and Keiron at the same time is that it's not often in the business world that you are offered a second chance. And it's to be stressed that mobile operators and carriers in general have missed totally the digitalization of their assets in the early 2010, even by late 2000s. And here, Open Gateway APIs definitely offer them that redemption. I totally see that this is a unique opportunity, and if they are having cold feet on it, that will not represent in the future. We see already the other companies in the communication space have been coming out of nowhere, no network, just API, and having capitalization much bigger than most of these mobile operators. No investment, no licenses in 5G, 4G, whatever has been there. So they totally missed something there. This is the last chance. You don't often have that in this world. So I think definitely that's why there is in the community a big sense of urgency to really adopt and go somewhere where they can finally get that new growth back.
So it almost seemed like a why wouldn't they scenario for the mobile operators. Perhaps you could touch upon some of the obstacles that they may face that you understand to share a bit of context.
I can start, and again, as usual, Guillaume, please join. So it's a new thing, right? As Guillaume rightly summed up, that the mobile operators missed or maybe ignored at some point as well the kind of digitization, right? They did it internally, but in a closed way, and that's why that word "open" in the Open Gateway is extremely important, right? So it's new to them. It's not new to the industry as a whole, but for the mobile operators community, and there are 1,250 there, right? They are all at various kind of stages of their even internal kind of digitization. So it's new to them, right? That's one thing. Second thing is mobile operators are extremely regulated, and if the regulation is not clear or there are different interpretation, then the usual reaction to this is let's not do it. And that's not surprising, and that's not wrong as well, right? Because there is a lot on stake. Also, as we all know, mobile operators are, there is always a capex challenge, not for all, but for many, right? Because there are multiple categories of mobile operators there as well. And also, now we are talking, the language has changed, and that's very refreshing. At least I'm sure, Guillaume, Keiron, you will agree to that as well. Earlier, we used to talk, whenever we used to talk about interfaces, not even APIs, we used to talk about diameter. We used to talk about, radius. We used to talk about SS7. Now we are talking about OAuth. We are talking about RESTful APIs. We are talking about, OpenID Connect, which is refreshing. The reason is this is the language that the, extended industry speaks. But this language is new to many of the mobile operators. And that's a barrier, right? And this is why we come in here, right? Because we speak both the languages. And we have been doing that for very long, right? We can actually bridge those, let's say language barriers, those, let's say, understanding barriers as well, and kind of, fix this. And sorry, I started to move into how do we fix it. But the problems, not the problems, the barriers.
Don't worry, no one else can see our questions, so carry on. It's fine. So the barriers there are few, but none of them are, not solvable. That's the important thing right now. And, we need to really use the acceleration and energy right now to solve it. And one very important thing is, I think we talked about earlier as well, Guillaume, you said as well, this digital inclusion. What happens if we don't do across the board? Because all the previous attempts was successful, but successful to, let's face it, only to the tier 1 operators, right? But there are 1,250. If we don't include all of those operators in this ecosystem, in that case, the users or the subscribers for those operators lose out on those innovation, and they are not included in this digital journey. And that's not fair, right? So it's beyond business as well. So it's I think it's very, very important for the society, the digital society on a whole.
I'll just keep it kind of short and sweet. I completely agree with everything, obviously, Gautam said. For me, the two, well, one in particular that I think is particularly that regulatory backdrop and the restrictive nature of the regulations that obviously kind of limit, or let's just say influence the risk appetite of the operators. So in my experience, depending on, and Open Gateway hopefully alleviate some of these challenges, but depending on who you're speaking to, it's almost a case of what can we do that is probably not going to tackle the problem or provide a solution, but takes us somewhere towards it, but is ultimately just totally risk averse. So the idea being that the most minimal amount of information that could be shared, the non-storing of data, it always ends up being stripped down. And that for me has been a challenge. I'd like to think that this will help, like I said. But I think the other thing is just to echo the point that Gautam made around the fact that this is very new and embryonic. What we have found over the years is that we're always, at least we're in a strong position of being able to have a lot of reference points. So speaking to an operator or even a group of operators in a particular country that may be struggling with maybe consent mechanisms, we've always got somewhere to say, well, actually, the way we got round that or we covered that was by doing it this way. And yeah, I think this whole ecosystem and this whole program of work hopefully collates all of this, because we've got all the answers. I think the problem is that I think the point that Guillaume made earlier, the siloed nature of everything has always been, it's relied on the likes of us to tell people, even in the same corridors, in the same companies, that, yeah, you are doing this, or this is how you do it, but they don't seem to speak to each other. So, yeah, they've been, for me, the biggest obstacles up to now.
Yeah. So about interoperability of the old world and the new world.
Exactly that, yeah.
So I think, Gautam, you started to touch upon kind of Sekura and where you come in here. And perhaps we could end the open gateway piece around the role that Sekura plays in making this easier for mobile operators and also kind of the requirements for them. Because clearly you are forging a path here. And I think sharing some of those insights would be great.
Sure. Thanks, James. So again, I'll start from where I was saying there are 1,250 operators, right? And one of the things that we all in Sekura are very passionate about, I think I mentioned that as well, is not excluding anyone, because I think as an industry, I at least accept that in all our previous attempts, we tried to focus on the tier one only, right? And that's unfair, especially for the digital society. So one of the things that we created in our, let's say, DNA, that we will not exclude anyone, right? And that is something that is going to help and is helping in the Open Gateway journey as well. First thing that we did was what I call, and again, we focus primarily on the identity part. In Open Gateway APIs, I'm sure we all know that there are 5 categories of APIs, right? The first one, the most important one, the most popular one as well, where there are maximum number of APIs, is what is known as anti-fraud. The name is a bit, I would say, it's appropriate, it's related, but it should have been probably identity. But anyways, because all the APIs are related to identity. But that's the part that we focus mostly. The next 4 are more on the network side, right? So mobile connectivity, which used to call VAS, then there is fixed connectivity, then there's the cloud and edge, then there's payments. Anyways, so that identity part is where we're focusing. And we categorize all these, let's say, 1,250 mobile operators in 3 ways. So based on their, what we call the identity maturity, right? Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Obvious one, right? Tier 1 is where there is an understanding of identity. There is an organization which deals with identity. They have a capability to expose identity as well, right? All that needs to happen is make it Open Gateway compatible. Easy ones, right? So that's category 1, you can say. But then there is category 2 and category 3, and that's where majority of the operators are, fortunately or unfortunately, right? Category 2 is where there is a basic understanding, but no capability is available. And, there is CapEx sensitivity as well. Majority of the operators are in there. Then there is category 3. No idea what is this about. Of course, there is no capability, and then no, kind of CapEx budget there as well, right? We want to include all. Category 3, if you start with, it's a bit tricky, because they don't know what it is, right? They don't know what identity is, what, gold mine they're sitting in. So you need to bring those into category 2 to start business, right? That's what we do, because we have been doing this thing. So Keiron has been doing this thing for ages. We all has been doing this thing. So we discuss with them, move them into category 2. Now they understand that there is a value in identity APIs, exposing through Open Gateway, etc. Right? In category 2, then this, okay, we understand the value, we can get some revenue, but really sorry, we don't have the capability, we don't have the platform, we don't know how to expose the APIs, we don't have the budget, the CapEx budget to do that as well. So don't worry, because this is where we come in. We have created a platform from ground up, right? We took the pain to create it. We say, take this in. We are not going to charge you any CapEx. Of course, we need to get into some sort of commercial rate, okay? Then we are going to expose you. You take you take the value out of it in the revenue, and basically then in that case, the entire, let's say, ecosystem benefits as well, because we are going to help you to do that, right? And it's not just theory. We have done this thing in India with two of the large operators, and they are live right now. Okay, they didn't have the capability. They understood the value. We gave our platform, and then within 10 days, actually, in one of the operators, large operators in India, we made from signature to the API exposure. Anyway, so that's our passion. The category one is easy, right? They know they have teams available. They all know us. We know them, right? We do the handshake and off they go, right? And Open Gateway has got, as is asked as well, there are some specific requirements as well, and that's important because that standardization and the single view across all these 1,250 operators is important. So there are some requirements from GSMA for Open Gateway, right? But we take care of it. We don't expect the operators to do it because otherwise it will be expensive. It will take time because they need to understand it. So what we do is we say, hey, you don't worry about whatever you have, or if you don't have any of the, let's say, APIs as well, like in the category one, we will take care of it. We know the data is there. We'll hook into that and we will expose the APIs in the Open Gateway API format, right? That's how we are helping, and we will continue to help all the operator communities around the world.
Just another example as well. Even providing the ability, and this is something that I've struggled with over the years as to why it's not really happened before, but having the ability to leverage ourselves as a commercial construct to sell as an operator on behalf of themselves and, you could argue, their competitors. Let's just call them their friends in this space. So I can remember distinctly a bid that was going in the UK many, many years ago with a tier one bank. And an operator called me at about 8 o'clock the night before it was due in to say, can we put a bid forward and use you as a basis to be this kind of white labeling thing? And it was a mess, essentially, because it was just I don't know, really. I mean, you've just given us about 3 hours to think about it. You look at it now, and it's the ability to just leverage the likes of ourselves to say, okay, there's the API. You can now access essentially what's going on behind, but we can do it in a way that is, and I think this is the critical bit, commercially sensitive. And it's fascinating to see it actually come to fruition and things actually, going live with it without having this, well, we can't do this because they will then know who we're working with, or they will know a price point. And it's like, no, we can solve all of that, and we can do it in a way that means that everybody wins, including the consumer and the enterprise that's taking the service. It's a bit of a no-brainer, but yeah, for me, that was a really, really significant moment.
Fantastic. Guillaume, anything to add?
Maybe just to add to, and not to add, but maybe to the question I have, because I can imagine you go through a lot of educational process, right, at Sekura. Either it's through the brands or through the mobile operators. What is coming back the most often for you? Because, for example, on our side, we have people asking us, do you know about Camara initiative, Open Gateway API? Can you help us to understand about that? What's happening there? What's the impact on the network? Or when it's the consumer, the customers, so like, how can we consume it quickly and so on? And a lot of confusion also. So what's the educational process from your side?
It's fascinating, actually, because it's a bit of I think I'm going to sound quite corny again here, but it's been a bit of a journey. So when it was all coming into fruition in terms of it became a little bit more public, my feeling is that there was almost a sense of, well, where does Sekura play now? Because this thing is going to solve the world's problems. And the initial education was more about treat this as being a reinvigoration of enablement. And actually, if anything, it will put us on steroids because we're probably about 3 years ahead of it anyway. So with this to layer on top, it's a good thing. What's then happened as time's progressed is the questions that I've had, and I find it quite fascinating, is that it will always be almost like, well, how do we buy? I can't see anywhere on the website that says click this button and I can buy 50 SIM swaps and whatever. Sounds quite crude, but something along that line. It's like, well, that's where we come in. And that commercial element, which is the bit that I was trying to explain before, that for me is the next step in the open gateway element, that specifically, I mean, that is critical. Because it's one thing having access to the service, and it's one thing having a greater coverage and a depth of service. But if it's not commercially accessible in a way that means that it's palatable across the whole chain, as Gautam said, the whole supply chain, then it's not going to work. And thankfully and hopefully, with all the experience that we've got and the fact that we've got a lot of live customers across a lot of use cases in lots of countries, those proof points, I'm hoping, will, smooth it, shall we say, or expedite it.
Yeah, it's something we have experienced also with some even large carriers, and even when they had already some form of mobile connect iterations and so on, going through mobile identity, we have seen with them was sometimes just to reprocess the basics. Why are you doing that? What are the reasons? Why? It's just the educational process around that. Why? And even if sometimes it's good to have the years in advance, because you see the don't do, but also the do, the does don't do, and then here we see a lot of that happening, going back to the basic on why you should do it, even if they've been involved in past. From the carrier side, on the brand side is a bit different. It's just, I have a problem, I need it to be resolved easily. How do I consume that? Right? What do you advise? And so that's literally the re-educational process is there, but as you say, maybe it's going to be accelerated and on steroid because of a much broader adoption by much more people on the new framework.
I'm hoping I mean, Gautam's probably got more experience with this than I have, but like this was years ago, by the way, but I used to look at sitting in between, say, banks predominantly and mobile operators and thinking, wow, the two slowest industries you could possibly be sat with, and you're trying to get things to move and align. I think there's been a really significant shift now that we're not all reliant on banks to be the consuming party, and gaming, gambling, retail, and all these other things, and if anything, have taken over. But on the operator side, it's that procrastination thing of, well, have we not got enough proof points now? Have we not got enough, essentially enough examples of how this is? It's almost, the way I'd look at it, it's almost negligent not to do it, because actually you're sat on a unique set of assets that you should be exposing or you should be contributing to society with, because how else can you determine certain fraud vectors or certain elements of identity that, I'll give you an example, actually. The younger demographic would not be able to access some services if they weren't being able to tap into the mobile side of identity, because there's nothing to go off. And it's things like that, hopefully.
I have a feeling also it's also about regulatory and the local regulators to kind of put their fist on the table, say. And one of the things we've observed, like in Latin America, in a country like Argentina, mobile identity started to be developed because of the banking regulator and the telco regulator just looking at the fraud in account takeover through SIM swap. And both regulators saying, okay, you are both responsible, the banks and the telco, for the fraud that occur on the end user. And that really drove the adoption of mobile identity to build something at least and to start something. But I think from a regulatory perspective also, you have procrastination. It's a difficult term to say from my French English, but with that procrastination coming from the telcos, the regulators has also a responsibility to drive that at some point, right? If there is nothing happening. I think
actually there's a bit of a fear there, isn't there? it reminds me a little bit of, if you look at the Canadian market and you've got Enstream there as this JV and this mature ecosystem, and you look at the regulation from FinTrack specifically in that country, and they're suggesting, utility bills, etc. But for me, there's almost a negligence there. For it should be referencing the fact that, well, whether you use a bill or whether you use records that are coming from, the core of a network, and essentially it's the same thing, if not more dynamic and probably more accurate. It's like, well, maybe they need to just think a little bit more about other reference points. Even in the UK with the, as we call it, Safer Auth, but like the number verification service, it has been ratified by the FCA, but there's nothing public about that other than something that was done behind scenes. It was, yes, this does tick the box of possession checking. Like for me, it's almost like, can we not just bring the regulators with us into something that's close to this century and have something that's a bit more appropriate?
So education start maybe there at the top.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree totally. I think it's a really good point.
So it feels like the time to bring it into kind of digital identity and use cases. And we are going to go into that and touch upon Open Gateway, but focus on those kind of use cases coming through. And I think it's probably an important moment to just mention the partnership that is in place between Sekura and GTC, because Sekura, with their leading platform, is available for mobile identity, and GTC, obviously with Guillaume and our team, take the lead in helping educate mobile operators on how to take that step. So it was a natural fit between our companies. So perhaps we could talk about digital identity and the importance of that.
Yeah, thanks, James. We started to talk about it, but that's something I'm sure Guillaume, Keiron, me, we are all very passionate about, right? And it's probably very fundamental, right? It's kind of maybe let's talk about that a bit, right? So let's face it, the internet was never designed to identify the humans, right? We cannot blame it on the internet. And it was designed to identify computers. That's why there are IP addresses, right? Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. We humans do not have IP addresses. So that's a fundamental problem of the internet. It was an accident, right? Initially, it was all fine because if you remember, I'm sure we all remember, what we used to do in the internet was browse or surf. So whether it's me who is surfing AOL or Yahoo, or it's you or it's the fraudster, who cared, right? Because there was nothing harm you can do. And the fraudster didn't care as well because they couldn't do anything, right? But then we started to do interesting things. We started to do banking. We started to do commerce. We started to buy and sell things. We started to do social media. And then it did matter if it's me who is doing that banking transaction, or it's Guillaume, or it's James or Keiron, or it's that fraudster. And these days, if that chatbot, right, that AI chatbot is doing it. But the internet didn't know how to identify me or differentiate me from anyone else and the fraudster. And that's a fundamental problem, right? Then we added some, I call those hacks. We added hacks, right, to identify me. We added hacks as password. I hate passwords. I hate it so much I had to do a TED talk on that. Anyways, so then we did OTPs. We did biometrics. These are all hacks. Has it stopped the problem? Otherwise, we will not talk about anti-fraud APIs in Open Gateway because they would have solved it, right? The problem is not solved. That's why we are talking about anti-fraud APIs. And by the way, the maximum number of APIs in Open Gateway are in the anti-fraud. 8 APIs are just in anti-fraud. Anyways, so, but if we think what the mobile operators did, and again, we may sound, or I may sound biased, but it's a reality. The mobile network, the first mobile network was established in 1991. So 1989 when the web or the internet was, established. 4 years later. So if you call that as an alternative internet, which is, it's an alternative internet, right? It connects, computers. It allows us to connect things. It worked differently. When I need to, use my bank application, it will challenge me, say, hey, you need to prove your Gautam by biometrics or password or OTP, then only we'll access it, right? But when I need to make a phone call or receive a phone call from my mobile operator, it will be funny, almost unacceptable if he says, hey, you cannot take that phone call until you prove your Gautam. It doesn't work that way, right? So the identity, the human identity, is part of that mobile network from day one. How do they do it? Using that humble SIM. I in SIM stands for identity, right? We take it for granted. So that's an asset. That's something that is there in that parallel internet from day one, and it's underutilized. And this is why we are very, very passionate about mobile identity. Let's open it up. And that's what Open Gateway APIs are doing. And that's why the anti-fraud APIs, which are identity APIs, are most popular. Because it's there. You just utilize it to identify me from the fraudster, right? And you solve it. And that's exactly what we are doing. And that's exactly what is one of the, of those 5 categories of APIs in Open Gateway, which is trying to do in a massive scale.
Amazing. And perhaps we could touch upon what some of those APIs actually are for digital identity and for kind of security, because I think it helps bring it to life as well.
Yeah, and majority of those are not new in the identity world, right? So Keiron touched upon number verification. So many names, right? Interestingly, we invented it in 2016 when we were part of GSMA. We called it MNV at that time, mobile number verification. So the number
your enrichment.
Yeah, exactly. That's another technical name we all call it, right? So number verification is, let's not get into the technicalities. It's an authentication, which I was talking about when you receive a phone call or when you, use your, let's say, mobile data network. It doesn't challenge me, right? It just happens using the cryptography in the SIM. SIM is a very, very strong hardware cryptographic engine, right? So that is happening or was happening and has been happening since 1991, more than 30 years, right? So the number verification is utilizing that capability and then opening it up through the Open Gateway APIs, right? But it's not new. We have been doing this thing since many years. Anyway, so that's one of the most popular one. And when I say popular one, it's the most adaptation of Open Gateway API that has happened is for this API. The other ones are, again, usual. SIM swap. They call it KYC. We call it MPM, mobile to person match, and the call forward APIs, right? These are and again, these are not news. We have commercial implementation of these APIs across the globe. Keiron, you may add.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, Gautam, that what we found is, so MPM, as Gautam referenced, or KYC match, where in particular regions, I use the Netherlands as one, France, where we're finding there's a significant quality in the data, purely because there's actually the regulations dictating that there's an onboarding process, etc., that needs to be done before you can get a SIM. So you've got more of a kind of inherent tie in there with the SIM and the human. It's meaning that we're finding that, the way I'd kind of describe it, if you look at the flow of onboarding where all these checks and balances are happening, what would traditionally have happened is we would be at the back of that flow. So all these checks would have been done, and then we would be labeled as alternative data. There would be a check done, and we'd be expected to verify somebody who essentially nobody else could verify, nor the technology could get close to. So then we bite into that to a degree, but obviously not be able to tackle the whole thing. But as the data is improving, and as the rigor and the checks and balances that are done against the humans at the front end, we're finding that we're now sitting earlier in that flow. And so the impact that we're having as a result of Open Gateway, as a result of the services that are there, is more significant, because instead of asking us to try and work on something that fundamentally isn't workable, we're now working on the whole pie. So yeah, no, the end use cases are fascinating, I think, because it's just, I still genuinely believe it's so embryonic in its possible application, and we've only scratched the surface. So
I think, and just to go on Keiron Gautam's raise, like digital identity is vast. It's come from biometrics to, you hear it more and more, passkeys and other type of authentication on the market and so on. But at the end of the day, and Gautam is really right, you have for the last 30 years all that mechanism among the networks and all the data they have. You have, I'm very binary when it comes to that. You have two types of data. You have like the physical live data, like your date of birth, your name, your address, and then you have a lot of other data you get online. And what you have is like the holy grail is that, oh, can I just get all these data together in one point to create that 360 view of an individual, either it's for fraud, for pure identification, and so on. And this is where the phone number is a fantastic first identifier. You might have others, right? You want to use the IP address? Feel free to use the IP address. Want to use the email? Fantastic, use it. But the phone number is really critical in that aspect, because it lives in both worlds. In the online world, where you have additional data like your brother, you can have the IP address, the domain of your emails, and so on. And then you have the physical world, right? But the phone number lives in both worlds, the physical and the online world. And this is, I would call it offline and online. And this is where you can really, at that 360 view, through the phone number, and the phone number can provide any banks, any social media, or any other institution out there, or service provider with a solid basis for digital identity, and then append more information. Either it's biometric, either it's other mean of authentication. But this is the best way to start with your digital identity journey there.
Yes, just want to add, that's a very good, point you raised on mobile numbers. So right now, if you see the digital world, there is two primary identifiers used. One is a mobile number, right? The other one is email ID. And there is a drastic difference between these two from trust perspective, right? Let's take email ID, because that has been there for longer than the mobile numbers, right? Someone can write a script and generate 100 million email IDs in a second, right? But the mobile number is simpler. It's 10-digit number. But no one can write a script to generate a mobile number. They can generate, a script to create 10-digit number, but that's not a mobile number. Because to get a mobile number, you need to go through a KYC process anywhere in the world. Maybe the KYC process is lighter or heavier. That's a separate thing. But to get an email ID, in majority, unless you are working for a government, you don't need to go through any KYC process, right? To get a Yahoo email ID or a Gmail ID, you need to go through a KYC process. But to get even a prepaid phone number, in majority of the, all of those 1250, you need to go through that. And that creates trust. So it's not just a number, 10-digit number. There is a trust behind that the businesses have. That, okay, to get that number, this guy or this person who claims that they have this phone number has gone through some sort of KYC process. And that's important. And that's what needs to be, utilized in this overall scheme of things, including in Open Gateway.
Yeah. So clearly we have the platforms, we have the momentum building, the trust is coming. Perhaps talking about some of the use cases in retail, finance could be a great way to kind of not end the call, because we always end with some obviously amusing little personal questions, but really to kind of finish off on this topic. So who wants to go first on the use cases?
Keiron, you want to start?
I'll leave it for you.
Yeah. So the way I'd look at it is, it wasn't that long ago that everything in this space was dominated by, as I've already referenced, kind of a fixation on tier one banks, and most of it was, shall we say, use cases derived from account takeover, SIM swap fraud, and that was the proof point. And so what would happen is you'd get, let's enable SIM swap because it's a problem. And Gautam's educated me more than anybody in terms of how actually things like this aren't relevant in some geographies because of, the churn of SIMs and people, using two SIMs and constantly looking for best data packages and whatever else. What I've seen very recently is there's probably the three key things here. One, as I've mentioned, around the KYC match service. When it comes to, shall we say, the more progressive entities or sectors, who are willing to try things to look at ways of enabling services that fundamentally couldn't be enabled before, we're finding that this is a complete sweet spot. It's the only thing that can tackle certain identity verification problems that before would have relied on, say, credit reference agency data, which is stale, out of date, and reliant on somebody having a credit history. Now we're just relying on somebody having a mobile phone. And let's face it, that's pretty much everybody. So that's one. The second one is the amalgamation of the signals that we're getting to be, let's just say, had a bit more maturity into things like risk and confidence scoring now. So using the number as a very quick way of determining, has there been anything significant that's changed? Has there been anything that we can leverage to determine things like tenure and build confidence? That's now being used more and more by banks and, again, other sectors like retail, gaming, gambling. And then the last one is safer auth, as we call it, or the number verification. The significance of SMS OTP being deprecated and the regulators and, let's face it, consumers desperate to get this thing moved out of the way. But there's never been a solution that is ubiquitous, relevant, mobile. I mean, essentially number verification. So, okay, there might still be a role for SMS OTP for the long tail and those that maybe don't have, I don't know, they don't want to go down the more progressive route. But essentially, that for me is the game-changing use case. It's the ability to say, for once, we don't need to rely on a technology that was never built for this purpose, and we can leverage something that's both secure and creates a better customer experience. So why wouldn't you? So yeah, that would be my kind of summary.
So, just to add on to what Keiron is saying, the use cases, we can start very, very simple, right? And the impact is massive. Let's take passwords, right? Believe it or not, that's the oldest technology we use. Passwords were invented in 1961, even before the internet was there, right? And there are 300 billion passwords in use. And if you check the DBIR, the Data Breach Investigation Report that Verizon publishes, one stats that doesn't change year on year. Any, data breach or fraud, as we call it, on the digital world, they're related to passwords, and then the percentage is 80 to 86%, right? So, that's something that's staring at us that, hey, I am a problem, solve it. And we have a solution. Keiron talked about SEKURA. We have been doing, as Guillaume, you added on as well, for the last more than 30 years, we have a solution sitting in the form of a SIM as an authentication. Let's just use it. And that's also part of the API suite in Open Gateway. That's the easiest one staring at us, and the impact will be absolutely massive, right? That's the simplest one. The other important thing is identity is plural. What does that mean is, if even in the organic world, if you say, okay, who is Gautam? Okay, Gautam has got two eyes. That doesn't define my identity, right? Because so I need to add plural attributes to make my identity in the organic world. Same exists in the digital world, but it's much, much more complex. Date of birth, address, first name, last name, so many things, right? The problem in the digital world is you don't see those attributes, right? You believe in whoever is providing. So, and in this world of post LLM and when the AI ML have got, at a crazy acceleration space, one of the big problem in the digital world that has happened is synthetic identity, right? Someone can create those static data and then represent me. How will anyone know? Because no one is seeing me, right? And here, Guillaume touched upon those static data as well. More the data is static, it's easier for a machine learning model to get trained. Let's face it, that's a reality right now, right? The more dynamic the data is, the machine learning model, you cannot train them because the data is dynamic, right? And these dynamic data are part of the mobile operators' systems. They're extremely dynamic. They're changing every few seconds. If you ask for a SIMSAP timestamp, in a second later, if you ask, maybe the status is not second later, maybe, a few hours later, the state may change, right? In that case, you cannot use that data to train a machine learning model and create a synthetic identity. That's another obvious use case, right? Let's just use that.
I think just to something that I didn't really touch on, but what I find with the applicable use cases for what we do, there's so we always talk about the humanization of what we're doing and the impact on the human. The best impact that we can have is to minimize the actual reliance on the human, because the human is the target. So from a fraud perspective, if you look at whether it be scams or whether it be just a simple kind of SMS OTP, which then socially engineered, et cetera, it's never the technology as such that's being undermined, or there's never, some clever kind of workaround that's been done to hack into something. It's normally a very straightforward human-to-human conversation, because unfortunately, these things are all visible, they're all interceptable, and they're all coerced or able to be coerced. Whether we're talking about authentication or any of the signals or verification that's going on in the background, because of the dynamism, because it's invisible, we can tailor the use case and we can tailor the experience to fit the individual. And it takes away these issues and I often reference that, my parents are critically vulnerable. And I can remember my dad being asked to record his voice and my mum being asked to record the voice. Like, my dad's got Parkinson's and he starts shaking violently because he's being asked to do something that he literally has no idea of the applicability of it. So why is he being asked to do that? Don't just try and shoehorn some technology in and say that's it and away we go. It's that there are ways of gleaning and determining identity, fraud and risk and confidence, or whatever we want to call it, without having to impact that kind of human interaction. That's a critical thing for me. I just think we've got that wrong.
Yeah, that's and completely agree with Keiron, right? So humanization of technology, humanization of identity, that's probably is the most critical thing for the industry, right? And I have said it many times. I finished my TED talk with that quote as well. It's from Steve Jobs. He said about technology that the technology should either be beautiful or it should be invisible. He was actually talking about humanization, right? Technology can never be beautiful unless it's, the finished technology will be beautiful, probably, right? All these things we are talking about, the cryptography in the SIM, it's ugly, right? If you see the cryptographic key, the KI key, or any of the other keys, it's not beautiful, right? So it has to be invisible. That's the only choice you have, right? So if you make that technology invisible, which means I am the weakest link, right? As Keiron was talking about his parents, I am the weakest link. If it is invisible to me, that's what humanized identity, humanized technology is. And that's exactly what the mobile identity services that we are doing now, right? So one of the, again, coming back to one of the, let's say, use cases, APIs, whatever you call it, number verification. The another name, more popular name, more business friendly name is silent mobile verification or silent authentication, right? Or seamless authentication. That's what it is called in India. The reason it is said that it is invisible, right? So the user, as me as a user, I don't need to do anything. It's invisible to me, and that's humanized, right? If it is invisible to me, in that case, I, as the weakest link, will not do any funny things. There is no OTP that I'll hand it over, right? There is no face verification where all those deepfakes can take over. There is no password that someone will steal in. There is no passkeys, maybe another day. That's really one of the most dangerous things that we have been promoting as an industry. There are cryptographic keys which are stored on the device, which can be stolen, right? But if there is nothing I have, that fraudster can call me, say, hey, can you hand over the OTP? What OTP? I don't know. I have not received any OTP. Can you click that link? What link? I don't have any link. So in that case, humanizing the identity and technology makes it much, much more secure and, of course, more, let's say, usable and less friction.
Perfect. And I can't think of a better way to kind of finish it around the kind of, whenever I think of Steve Jobs and Apple, actually the way you've put it, beautiful and invisible in terms of the technology, is the perfect summary. And clearly mobile network operators looking to move into this space, they can tell by the passion that you have exhibited here from a Sekura perspective in terms of your platform. So let's shift it on, Guillaume, if that's okay, onto the personal questions maybe, and we'll see. So Gautam and Keiron, did you join Sekura because you were going to sponsor Norwich and your passion for Norwich and football, or because of obviously the digital identity platform?
So I'm a Liverpool fan. So it's nothing to do with Norwich. And I would just say that actually it's just purely aligned to the fact that Norwich and our head office just happens to be in Norfolk. I'm actually one of the co-founders, or at least one of the co-creators, albeit I only joined quite a bit later. But the concept and the opportunity that, for me, a number have tried, a number have failed. And I think a lot of it is because a lack of focus. I think a lot of people have unfortunately just have ran out of energy and given up, particularly on the operator side. So apologies, operators, because it's not been easy. But over that hump now, and with the Norwich sponsorship in mind, by the way, if you ever want a ticket, there's plenty going. I probably shouldn't have said that. But it's maybe we'll be in the Premier League like Norwich next year. Who knows? I don't know. But I joined because of the opportunity purely, and the fact that, as frustrating as it is, it's also very exciting.
And Gautam, I take it you're a Norwich fan.
Now I am, because I'm not into that much of a football. Now I am. Now I understand football a bit. Being an Indian origin person, I'm more into cricket. But of course, I have watched many of the Norwich matches now, and I understand more and more of it. So that actually is obvious that I am with Sekura due to the passion that we all join in, and it actually continued from my previous journey as well, right? The reason I moved from Vodafone Group, I worked with Vodafone Group for 13-14 years, right? I moved from Vodafone Group to GSMA was exactly that, right? To do this identity thing, because in 2006 or 7, I don't remember when, I was talking to one of my managers about, hey, there is some amazing assets that operators have, right? Why don't we use that to solve the identity problem? And I was talking about the SIM cryptography. That was 2006-7. So my manager said, why don't you send an email to GSM? I sent it. I didn't receive a response anyway. And I forgot about it, right? In 2013, I received, the same manager, then moved to GSMA, right? And he said, hey, you remember that thing that you sent? I said, I'm really sorry. I don't remember, because it's been 6-7 years, right? He said that identity thing, I said, I still don't remember. Then he said, that assets that the mobile, I do remember. Do you want to, come and help out the industry do it? Of course. And then I moved to GSMA. And then I met Keiron and Mark in the Mobile Connect journey. We all are still passionate about that. And that's what Sekura is. So that's, natural move.
So I would normally ask another question, but once again, I think you've just kind of embodied what's important about Sekura and where you all came from. And I know, getting back to Guillaume and his birthday, he couldn't have thought of a better thing to do than discuss mobile identity with you guys. So
that's my, also passion about it and so on. I was on mute because you didn't hear it, but I had like a lot of ping coming in, people wishing me happy birthday. I had to hide that.
Guillaume, I've been sat here for over an hour now, desperately wanting to say happy, and I've been trying to get your surname to sound like birthday. So happy birthday. I can't do it, but the sentiment's there.
No worries. Thanks a lot, guys. But being here talking, it's a critical topic. We said it's the foundation of many challenges that we have ahead. And when I say we, I think Gautam also mentioned the society, digital society, but the society as such, either is digital inclusion, security, emancipation. Also, I think for a lot of people, that's very important, and this is the base. So yeah, it's a topic I'm happy and proud to talk about during my birthday.
There you go. And with that, I just want to say a really big thank you. You've been fully engaged, and really it's been captivating listening to this topic. So Keiron and Gautam, on behalf of GTC, I just want to say thank you. And Guillaume, thank you for your contributions as always.
Thank you. And happy birthday again, Guillaume.
Yeah, happy birthday. And thanks, James.
Thanks, James.